Dagan, a new student at a local middle school, was an easy target for his classmates due to his nerdy appearance. Their incessant bullying didn't cease even when Dagan pleaded for mercy, the torment continuing unabated until their teacher intervened. Tragically, the teacher merely became another tormentor, and Dagan's pleas for help fell on deaf ears, the bullies going unpunished and his misery only intensifying. Being an orphan, Dagan had no confidants, no friendly ears to whom he could express his sorrow. One day during recess, a fellow student discovered a malicious note stuck to Dagan's back, a cruel joke declaring his parentless status. The culprit, a notorious bully, took pride in his cruel prank. However, the other student's reaction wasn't what he expected. Consumed by rage, he retaliated fiercely, punishing the bully for his heartlessness. This incident served as an eye-opener for Dagan, who realized that bullies too could be brought down if they encountered a stronger adversary. Once home, he examined his scrawny physique in the mirror, understanding that his perceived weakness had made him a target. Dagan made a vow to himself that day, a resolve to become stronger, unbeatable, and immune to bullies. His resolve led him to withdraw from school temporarily, choosing instead to dedicate his time and energy to rigorous physical training. Days turned into weeks, then months, as he trained relentlessly, barely noticing his physical transformation from a lean, bullied kid to a robust, muscular young man. Dagan's eventual return to school caused quite a stir. His classmates were taken aback by his dramatic physical transformation, and even his attractiveness. The girls began to admire him, while most of the boys chose to maintain their distance, influenced by Dagan's newfound reputation. During his absence, Dagan had been frequently engaging in street fights, his name rapidly gaining infamy. This reached its pinnacle when he single-handedly resolved the violent conflict that had gripped the Inchin area, known as the Age of Blood. In one decisive week, he managed to subdue all those involved in the conflict, becoming a local legend overnight. His days of being a victim of bullying were firmly in the past, replaced by a reputation as a fearsome and formidable figure. Dagan wasn't just a peacemaker, but a revered authority in his locality. His actions, while they effectively quelled discord, led to his suspension from school. No longer could he engage in regular academic pursuits like his peers. His spotty attendance record, a product of his long-term absence from school, negatively impacted his grades, leaving him on the precipice of academic failure. As a solution, Dagan needed to pass a qualification exam. Meanwhile, he was compelled to find a part-time job at a convenience store to fend for himself. Life had become a hectic blend of cramming for his qualification exam and working part-time, leaving little room for self-care. So much so, he began to resemble a middle-aged man rather than a youth. During a shift, Dagan faced harassment from a group of young customers demanding cigarettes and alcohol. The manager, an old man, was present, yet instead of intervening, he instructed Dagan and the youth to settle their differences outside. Out in the open, Dagan offered the youth a 3-second head start before defending himself, knocking one out. The man's friends jumped into the fray, but Dagan handled them all deftly. Only one among them recognized Dagan's identity as the chief authority of the Inchin area. Confronted with the reality of their situation, the group conceded and apologized, and Dagan diffused the situation without further violence. Unknown to Dagan, a woman from the Golden Dragon Education Foundation had captured the entire incident on camera. She reached out to Dagan with an intriguing proposal. Her organization was launching a project to tackle the Iljin, or school bullies, by strategically placing another Iljin within their ranks. Their chosen one was Dagan. Eventually, at the age of 20, Dagan entered high school, no qualification exam needed. He stepped into the new environment as a transfer student. On his first day, Dagan found himself defending a classmate from an Iljin. Despite the bully's imposing stature and the Foundation's explicit non-violence rule, Dagan couldn't help but intervene, doling out a rough lesson. Not just to one, but 2 bullies, before their leader appeared. A man known as Manhwa, he was unlike any other. Despite his initial impression, Manhwa demonstrated formidable strength, skillfully incorporating bluffing into his attack strategy, a tactic that earned Dagan's respect. What was more surprising was Manhwa's mastery of real combat techniques that repeatedly caught Dagan off guard. He considered several times that, were his reflexes a smidge slower, Manhwa's attacks might have landed. Regardless, Dagan overpowered Manhwa effortlessly, knocking him unconscious with a mere 3 blows. In this triumphant victory, Dagan sent a stern message to the Iljans. He vowed to stand up against anyone who threatened his classmates. At a glance, Dagan might seem intimidating, yet beneath that rugged exterior lay a heart of gold. However, unbeknownst to them, the duel between Dagan and Manhwa was recorded and circulated among the students, ultimately reaching the ears of those in Class 3. When the dust finally settled, the class began, and Dagan immersed himself in his studies, paying no heed to the female students vying for his attention. When a Class 2 leader named Kim Myung-jung intruded, causing a ruckus with Manhwa, Dagan rebuked them for disrupting his concentration. Infuriated, Myung-jung attempted to provoke Dagan, earning himself a painfully tight grip from Dagan that made him cry out in agony. When Dagan let go, Myung-jung retaliated with an attack. Dagan dodged with ease and retaliated with a powerful punch that rendered Myung-jung unconscious, leaving the spectators in shock. As Dagan returned to his studies, a group of Class 3 students, led by a student named Sim Sangbo, encircled him. Despite Sangbo's reputation as the strongest among the students he'd previously faced, Dagan remained unfazed, boldly belittling Sangbo for seeking strength in numbers. Infuriated, Sangbo challenged Dagan to a showdown after school, adding to Dagan's bewilderment about his hectic first day. Surprisingly, Manhwa and his gang, preferring Dagan's leadership over becoming Sangbo's punching bags, pledged to assist Dagan in the impending confrontation. Regardless of Dagan's indifference, Manhwa's group persisted in trailing him, providing him with intelligence about Sangbo's tactics. Their association with Dagan attracted attention from other Iljans. One even attempted to intimidate Dagan, but he managed to keep his cool, avoiding a fight. He was mindful of his deal with the organization that employed him. Keeping his identity secret was paramount, or he risked reverting to his bleak former life. Amidst this predicament, Dagan left the premises, only to encounter the student who had earlier tried to bully him. From this student, Dagan discovered that Sangbo was using his classmates as sparring partners, and this revelation compelled him to intervene. Before his confrontation with Sangbo, Dagan demonstrated his strength by taking down one of the most formidable students with a single powerful punch. This act caught Sangbo's attention and challenged him to step forward. Concurrently, Dagan's arrival in Class 3 piqued the curiosity of his peers, who eagerly anticipated the upcoming clash between the two titans. As spectators began to gather around the designated battleground, Sangbo initiated the fight. With lightning speed, he unleashed a flurry of strong punches aimed at Dagan. Quick on his feet, Dagan deftly dodged each attack, harnessing the momentum to deliver a powerful counterstrike that even Sangbo, despite his heightened defenses, could not shrug off. Seizing the opportunity, Dagan exploited Sangbo's reliance on punches by aiming kicks at his legs. The onslaught was relentless, leaving Sangbo barely able to stand. Helpless, he could do nothing but shield himself from the barrage. Backed against a wall, with no room to retreat, Sangbo could only endure the onslaught, resembling more of a punching bag than a competitor. The spectators watched, realizing the fight had turned one-sided. Worn out from the relentless assault, Sangbo succumbed, his body falling to the ground. Yet Dagan, unsatisfied, allowed him 10 seconds to regain his footing, to serve once more as his punching bag. With time, Sangbo came to the bleak realization that further resistance would only result in more injury. With a heavy heart, he conceded defeat, shocking the crowd who had not expected Dagan's overwhelming strength. Murmurs spread through the audience. Some speculated that Dagan was still concealing his true abilities, given the attention he was garnering. Despite his loss, Sangbo couldn't swallow his defeat, vowing revenge against Dagan. The defeat of Sangbo became the talk of the school, Dagan's reputation growing with each passing class he dominated. Other classes braced themselves for the storm that was Dagan. The school, particularly the Iljans, kept a close watch on Dagan, with some planning preemptive strikes to prevent their class from falling to him. Manhwa revealed that, willingly or not, Dagan was bound to be drawn into unwanted fights. Despite Manhwa's warnings, Dagan intended to return home. However, upon noticing the director's car parked outside the school, he couldn't resist joining her for the ride. In the car, she casually remarked about Dagan stirring up trouble on his very first day. As Dagan braced for the inevitable repercussions of his bold actions, the director surprised him. She declared that there would be no penalties for him, hinting at a shift in the organization's approach and future plans to relax the strict rules that might have otherwise expelled him from school. This news triggered a twofold reaction in Dagan. On one hand, he felt liberated, unshackled from the fear of expulsion that could now let his fighting spirit soar. But on the other hand, an unsettling thought seeped into his mind, suggesting that he might be under surveillance, or that a spy was planted in the school to keep an eye on him. Regardless of his mixed feelings, he was ushered into a new living arrangement by the director, a lavish apartment, a stark contrast to his prior living conditions, one that he could only dream of entering before. This luxurious abode, once inhabited by the director herself, was now Dagan's sanctuary, complete with a personal allowance for daily expenses. However, the next day, Dagan found himself in the hot seat, called out by a teacher over the previous day's commotion. Amidst this, a woman named Ji-ina, keeping a discreet distance, keenly observed Dagan, suspecting that he was concealing something. Her suspicion was fueled by witnessing Dagan's seemingly close connection with the director the day before. Back in class, Dagan was increasingly paranoid about the potential spy amongst his peers, with his suspicion hovering particularly over his deskmate Minsu, whose sudden adoption of glasses was peculiar. However, Minsu's explanation that his concern for Iljun in class compelled him to prefer lenses over glasses temporarily alleviated Dagan's suspicion. Nevertheless, on his way home, Dagan unknowingly caught the attention of Ji-ina, who shadowed him, hoping to uncover more about his mysterious persona. Puzzling over the connection between Dagan and the director, Ji-ina suddenly found herself in the crosshairs of a group of Iljuns tailing Dagan. One Iljun spotted Ji-ina, misconstruing her surveillance of Dagan as an interest in him. Caught off guard, Ji-ina resorted to using pepper spray on the Iljun, inadvertently attracting the attention of his accomplices and distracting them from tailing Dagan. As she found herself cornered by the Iljuns and on the verge of breaking down, Dagan reappeared, coming to her rescue. Finally snapping under the persistent tracking, Dagan confronted the Iljuns about their incessant following. He boldly challenged them to a showdown, inviting them to a secluded location, far from the prying eyes of the school. Despite their confusion over Dagan's strange behavior, the Iljuns and Ji-ina chose to trust him and followed his lead. When they reached their destination, they found it already occupied by two Iljuns from another school. Initially, these two tried to claim the territory, demanding Dagan's group to leave. However, when one of them mentioned Kim Wan-wong's name, the two other school Iljuns retreated hastily, giving Dagan a clue that Kim was pulling the strings. No sooner had they left than four new adversaries surrounded Dagan, with Ji-ina observing the standoff from a safe distance. One of the largest of these new challengers brazenly blew a puff of cigarette smoke into Dagan's face. That was the spark that ignited Dagan's fury. He knocked the smoker down with shocking ease, then landed a solid punch on his face. That single blow was enough to knock the Iljun unconscious, striking fear into the hearts of his companions. Despite their fear, they knew they had no choice but to fight. Failure would mean facing Kim Wan-wong's wrath for their hesitation. Dagan didn't give them a chance to launch an attack. Instead, he targeted them one by one. His punches were devastating, each one potent enough to knock an opponent out cold. But when only one adversary remained, Dagan, on the brink of stepping over a dangerous line, chose to cease the fight. Ironically, the unconscious Iljuns dreamed of being pursued by Dagan, further emphasizing his formidable prowess. Upon regaining consciousness, Dagan commanded them to line up for an interrogation. Unbeknownst to Dagan, the first two Iljuns had witnessed the entire ordeal and had promptly reported back to Kim Wan-wong, who was dumbfounded that a single person could defeat four in such circumstances. Meanwhile, Ji-ina, not wanting to be entangled in the savage display, excused herself. After her departure, Dagan issued an order to the battered Iljuns. They were to bring Kim Wan-wong to him the following day. The Iljuns, now more afraid of Dagan than Kim, agreed. The following day, however, as the third period came to an end, there was still no sign of Kim. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, Dagan set out to find Kim himself. His journey led him to Class 6, where he was met by the 6th grade queen, Beck Suzy. Suzy, irked by Dagan's intrusion, angrily slapped him, causing his glasses to fall off. The sight of Dagan without glasses left her momentarily stunned, as she was captivated by his unsuspected handsomeness. Just then, Kim Wan-wong made his dramatic entrance, assaulting a larger student named Yang Jinmo. At that moment, Dagan recognized the person standing in front of him as Kim Won-wong. Wanting confirmation, Dagan confronted him. Kim Won-wong responded with a menacing smile, confirming his identity. As Dagan and Won-wong locked eyes, the rest of the class watched in trepidation. The sudden attention did not sway Dagan, who, dismissing any further conversation, lunged at Won-wong with a calculated punch. His attack was intercepted by Yu Jisayak, a 5th-grade student. Dagan acknowledged Jisayak's strength, but warned that it wouldn't be enough to topple him. Jisayak quickly realized the immense power that Dagan wielded and knew he was no match. Instead, he tried to diffuse the tension by stating that Dagan had no concrete evidence to accuse Won-wong of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Won-wong relentlessly assaulted Yang Jinmo, blaming him for causing the misunderstanding. In that moment, Dagan understood that he needed irrefutable evidence against Won-wong to bring him down without becoming the villain. Choosing to back off temporarily to collect proof, he left the scene. Once Dagan was gone, Won-wong was seen conspiring with students from another school to orchestrate Dagan's downfall. One of the students from the rival school also suggested including Ji-ina in the plot, eager for a chance to toy with her. The following day, a contrite Yang Jinmo approached Dagan, extending an invitation to step out as a form of apology. Not only did Jinmo invite Dagan, but he also included Ji-ina in the invitation. Unexpectedly, Ina's friend Ara joined them. As the quartet arrived at the appointed spot, a gang from the rival school was already lying in wait. Ji-ina and Dagan were immediately incensed, while Ara was blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. Among the crowd, a burly student named Min Byung-won, known for his rancor, stepped forward, ready to initiate a fight. Dagan, unfazed by Byung-won's intimidating stature, provocatively encouraged him to make the first move. As Byung-won launched his attack, Dagan skillfully countered, gripping his adversary in a stranglehold. As the onlookers urged Byung-won to surrender, Dagan tightened his grip, choking the life out of him. This sudden, ruthless display stunned everyone. Dagan had acted in kind, matching their murderous intentions with his own, asserting his dominance in the process. In the heat of the moment, Dagan quickly instructed Ji, Ina, and Ara to keep their distance, resolving to face the 9 adversaries single-handedly. Astonishingly, Dagan eliminated 7 opponents in a swift motion, leaving the remaining 2 in utter disbelief, questioning if he was even human. Just as Dagan thought the battle was nearing its conclusion, reinforcements arrived to challenge him, one of them wielding a menacing baseball bat. The situation quickly escalated for Dagan, but to everyone's surprise, help arrived in the form of Minsu, leading the notorious Class 1's Iljin, Manhwa, and his gang. Minsu, Manhwa, and even Yang Jinmo had grown weary of Won-wong's oppressive behavior. Driven by frustration, Yang Jinmo decided to join forces with Dagan. He relayed the situation to Minsu, who in turn informed Manhwa, culminating in their arrival. The battlefield was now divided, with Dagan confronting 2 Iljins from rival schools, while Manhwa, his subordinates, and Yang Jinmo faced the 8 remaining foes, intending to eliminate at least a few. Despite the opponents being armed, Manhwa and his gang were not defenseless, having brought concealed firearms of their own, making the baseball bat-wielding foe less of a threat. Without wasting a moment, Manhwa demonstrated his prowess, swiftly taking down the baseball bat-carrying adversary. When one of the bullies attempted to attack Manhwa, his subordinates stepped in, displaying not just a haphazard battle frenzy, but a coordinated effort to protect one another. As Manhwa's gang grappled with 8 opponents, Dagan squared off against 2 Iljins, Ijungman and Cha Jinwoo. In an unexpected turn of events, Ijungman seized Dagan from behind. Smirking, he anticipated this to be Dagan's downfall. Ijungman launched himself at Dagan, securing a tight grip around him from behind. Dagan gasped in surprise as Ijungman declared that in wrestling, the one who ambushes from behind is declared the victor. Sensing imminent danger, Dagan began struggling fiercely for his freedom. He twisted and turned, trying every possible direction, but to no avail. Ijungman's grip was unyielding. Dagan recognized the imminent threat of a back suplex, a deadly wrestling move that could prove fatal if struck on the back of the head. Instinctively, Dagan braced himself against a wall, using every ounce of his strength to thwart Ijungman's attempt. As he felt Ijungman falter in executing his suplex, Dagan seized the moment, throwing himself onto the ground, and finally freeing himself from Ijungman's iron grip. As Youngman squared up, Kwon shot to his feet, ready to counterattack. His fists were clenched, knuckles white as he readied to deliver a forceful blow. However, an unexpected strike came from behind. Reacting swiftly, Kwon sidestepped a kick that was targeted at his head. To his surprise, it was Jinwoo, not Youngmin, who had attacked him. Kwon's annoyance was palpable. The formidable teamwork between Youngmin and Jinwoo was frustrating. Having rescued Youngmin, Jinwoo proclaimed his strategy. He would relentlessly assault Kwon, while Youngmin was tasked with defensive duty. Before Youngmin could affirm with his proficient taekwondo skills, Jinwoo launched an offensive, his left leg slashing through the air towards Kwon. Kwon deflected the kick, the thunderous sound echoing around them, a testament to Jinwoo's strength. Meanwhile, Youngmin, now in his assigned role of protector, observed the escalating brawl. Kwon, increasingly accustomed to Jinwoo's movements and style, deciphered that Jinwoo's primary strength lay in his dynamic kicks. Kwon attempted to launch a downward strike, hoping to divert Jinwoo's attack. Yet his prediction had been preempted by Jinwoo, who nimbly evaded Kwon's move. It dawned on Kwon that Jinwoo maintained distance not for defense, but to launch his long-range attacks effectively. It became clear that in this fight, Jinwoo spearheaded the offensive, coordinating with Youngmin, who was waiting for an opportune moment to strike when Kwon let his guard down. Seeing no alternative, Kwon resolved to eliminate one threat before dealing with the other. He honed his focus on Jinwoo, launching a flurry of punches. By keenly observing Jinwoo and Youngmin's maneuvers, he managed to overcome them. Kwon, emotionally spent, menacingly cornered Youngmin, gripping him by the throat. He warned them against crossing paths with Golden Dragon. His allies, riled up, seemed keen to continue the altercation. Kwon, however, declined, citing exhaustion and a lack of desire for further confrontation. He extended a gracious thanks to his comrades for their assistance. Kwon then turned to Arya and Gina, innocent bystanders caught in their skirmish. Arya blushed, thanking Kwon for their intervention, while Gina wore an expression of seething anger. She spat out her words, condemning Kwon and his allies, comparing them to the defeated opponents. She denounced their violent resolution methods, grabbing Arya's hand and departing swiftly. Kwon could only remain silent on the journey home, her words echoing in his mind. Feeling remorse for her outburst against Arya's friends who had been their saviors, Gina extended a sincere apology to Arya. However, Arya, with a deep understanding of Gina's predicament, knew that Gina's hospital-ridden brother had been the trigger for her anger. In the midst of this emotional exchange, Jin Mo and his gang decided to retaliate against Kim Won-wong, who had treated them like inferiors for too long. After putting him in his place, Jin Mo assumed the role of the boss. However, his reign was short-lived when Dagan, a dominant figure, questioned him. He asked if Jin Mo was prepared to defend his newfound title, or if he preferred a swift end to his leadership. Shaken by Dagan's intimidating aura, Jin Mo surrendered instantly, requesting a mild punishment. Dagan, however, landed a powerful punch that knocked him out cold. He instructed Jin Mo's gang to cease their intimidation of other students, disbanding the group and assuming control over 4 classes simultaneously. Dagan's actions won him the admiration of the former bullies, who quickly became his supporters. They invited him to join them in games of League of Legends in the school's PC room, and gradually began to soften their tough exteriors. Female students even felt bold enough to reprimand them for attempting to tease Dagan. The next day, Dagan visited Kim Yongjung's class to ensure the bullying had indeed stopped. He found that the Shim Shanbo gang had stopped attending school altogether. Upon rechecking Jin Mo's class, Dagan found them reformed, unaware that a new threat, the school queen Suzy, lurked within the same classroom. Suzy had forced Jin Mo's gang to turn on him. Jisayak, drawn to Suzy's class by his peers, was persuaded to form an alliance against Dagan, who Suzy found irritating due to his lack of interest in her. She craved the attention Dagan refused to give, just like the other boys in her class, who were completely under her influence. After school, the untouched bosses, Jisayok Dusik, Shanghua Dojin, and Shanghun, held a clandestine meeting. Jisayok proposed that they unite to neutralize the threat of Dagan, who had been systematically gaining control over the classes. However, the bosses dismissed the idea of an alliance as pointless, considering their lack of camaraderie and the ongoing animosity between Dusik and Yisayok, which frequently sparked emotional outbursts from Jisayok. In a tense moment, Sung Hoon, the de facto leader of the group of bright students, chose to remain cool-headed, suggesting that they refrain from fighting. Among the group, only Shang-hun agreed to form an alliance. The other leaders, however, decided against it and promptly departed. Yet, Sung-hoon harbored his own plans. His tactical approach and leadership qualities quickly placed him as the head of the newfound alliance, leaving Jasayak both intrigued and unsettled about the enigmatic Sung-hoon. Meanwhile, Kim Do-hyun, who was vexed due to the relentless bullying and theft inflicted on Dojan, felt compelled to bring this matter to the attention of Senior Byom-ho, a member of the formidable Deadly Six. In a casual gathering with his friends, their banter filled the air, revolving around money, alliances, and other seemingly trivial matters. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Senior Byom-ho, flanked by his companions. Every one of them immediately showed respect towards Senior Byom-ho, including Dojin. However, upon noticing Do-hyun's terror-stricken face behind Senior Byom-ho, Dojin grew suspicious. His suspicions were confirmed when it turned out that Senior Byom-ho was there to extract a fee from Do-hyun. Annoyed, Dojin attempted to confront Do-hyun, who was so intimidated that he could only quiver behind the imposing figure of Senior Byom-ho. Recognizing Do-hyun's fear, the senior member assured him that he was safe by his side and that there was no need to fear. He was merely teaching his disobedient juniors a lesson. Hearing this, Dojan burst into derisive laughter, scoffing at Senior Byom-ho's claims of still having clout within the organization. Provoked by Dojan's mockery, an irate Senior Byom-ho slapped Dojin and lashed out at him. To his surprise, Dojin showed no signs of pain, only ridiculing him for his feebleness. Moments after being kicked out of school, Dojin retorted with a forceful punch to Byom-ho's stomach, causing him to reel in pain. Dojin didn't stop there. He continued his onslaught, landing a series of punches that left Byom-ho staggering. Dojan's friends, taken aback by the brutal spectacle, tried to intervene. However, their pleas fell on deaf ears, as Dojan, driven by his obsession with money, continued his relentless assault. His ire was directed towards Do-hyun, who had chosen to pay Byom-ho to beat Dojan, rather than hand over the money to him. This revelation stirred up the anger of the two companions who accompanied Byom-ho, leading them to join the escalating conflict. Dojin, a bold individual, defies the highly valued norms of seniority in South Korean culture. Typically, respect and politeness towards elders are expected, regardless of the elder's attitude. However, Dojin doesn't hesitate to fight back against Byom-ho's senior friends, who were disrespectful to him. Even when his friends attempt to assist him against the trio of larger senior men, Dojin insists on handling the situation alone, with an underlying intention of claiming Dong-hyun's money for himself. Laughing menacingly, Dojin proceeds to fend off the senior men. He brazenly demands Dong-hyun's money, triggering fear in Dong-hyun, who curses and attempts to escape. But Byom-ho, armed with a baseball bat, seeks to stop him. In a twist of events, Dojin successfully overpowers Byom-ho and his friends, facilitating Dong-hyun's escape. Dojin's friends, alarmed by his audacity against Byom-ho, a reputed gang member, are left trembling. Unfazed, Dojin dismisses their fear, believing these so-called gangsters were merely posturing to gain respect. The next day at school, Dojin, now nicknamed Dagan, is confronted by the former first-grade boss, whom he had previously defeated. Accusations are thrown around, stating Dagan's intent to conquer all first-grade bosses. The situation escalates when the topic of operating expenses money, a form of tribute for the bosses, is introduced. Despite Dagan's initial resistance, he quickly realizes the established hierarchy in this school and the associated system of tributes are deeply entrenched. As Dagan is grappling with this new information, Jinmo summons him to the schoolyard where Suzy, a known tormentor, awaits. Initially reluctant to engage with Suzy, Dagan gives in when she becomes visibly irritated. A verbal altercation ensues, culminating in Suzy declaring herself as above all rules, the queen of the school. Unmoved by her assertion, Dagan stands his ground. Unexpectedly, a flustered Suzy grabs Dagan by the collar, her face burning red. Initially attempting to subjugate Dagan, she falters as her heart races. She instead refers to Dagan as APA. Meanwhile, Dojin, now in the company of second-year seniors Ja Ok and Gong Myung, watches as Ja Ok forcefully collects a late payment from a group of younger students. Dojin had always been taught the lessons of Buddhism by Ja Ok, who emphasized patience and diligent study of the teachings. Yet Ja-ok often acted against his own preachings, mercilessly beating kids who didn't fork over money. When Dojin found out the staggering amounts these children were extorted for, he was taken aback. The sums were significantly higher than what he remembered from his own time in first grade. This revelation sparked a desire in Dojin to overthrow Dagan and assume control over the first graders. After an episode of violence, Ja-ok and his gang decided to celebrate their ill-gotten gains by buying sausages. On their way, they ran into Dagan and Suzy, who were visibly close, holding hands. Ja-ok, always the self-proclaimed moralist, approached them, admonishing them for displaying such indecent behavior within the sacred school environment. Dagan, baffled by Ja-ok's rebuke, ended up mocking his balding head. This triggered a memory in Dagan of his days working at a convenience store where his manager was sensitive about his thinning hair. Feeling a pang of guilt, Dagan hastily apologized to Ja-ok about the bald comment, triggering a bout of laughter from Dojin. Ja-ok, stung by the mockery, was on the verge of losing control. He commanded Dagan to leave, but Dagan stood his ground, arguing they were there first. The tension escalated rapidly, until Sojin feigned a phone call to her brother. Gong Mi-young, aware of Sojin's brother's dangerous reputation, warned Ja-ok to steer clear. Ja-ok was visibly annoyed by this, forced to suppress his rage as he felt disrespected by his juniors. Even though Ja-ok maintained his composure, promising to deal with Dagan eventually, Dojin had other plans. He couldn't stand the wait and launched a surprise attack on Dagan and Suzy. Dagan, acting swiftly, pulled Sojin close to protect her from the imminent danger. The ferocious gleam in Dojin's eyes suggested a predator ready to pounce. Dagan shed his school coat, preparing for the battle, but the gathering crowd and Sojin's terrified screams forced him to reconsider. Lucky for him, the attention caused Dojin to rethink his decision to fight. Dojin's resentment lingered, especially because Dong-hoon had been absent from school and had not been able to deliver the money he'd promised. Dojin took matters into his own hands, ordering the class president to visit Dong-hoon's home and collect the money due the following week. But when the class president failed to locate Dong-hoon, Dojin decided to find him himself, discovering that Dong-hoon had been playing truant. On being found by Dojin, Dong-hoon was shocked to his core and on the brink of tears. Dojin, smiling menacingly, seized Dong-hoon's head, poised to smash it against an iron wire fence. In the heat of the afternoon, Dagan held study sessions with a group of his peers. Out of the blue, Dojin marched over and demanded that Jinmo leave, citing the lack of available seats. Naturally, Jinmo was resistant. Conceding in such a public manner would undermine his standing amongst the children. However, Dojin proposed a challenge, a simple game of rock, paper, scissors, which Jinmo unfortunately lost. Despite his initial frustration, Jinmo was secretly relieved, his loss serving as a justified reason for his retreat. To everyone's shock, Dojin delivered a forceful slap to Jinmo's cheek, propelling him across the room to collide with the classroom wall. Grinning broadly, Dojin proclaimed the slap was a penalty for losing at rock, paper, scissors. Meanwhile, Shanghua and Gong Mi-young were engaged in a discussion about the new kids' abilities and their own strategy. Shanghua was convinced that Dagan was a formidable opponent, possessing strength and an innate talent for combat. Dojin, although mischievous and overconfident, also showed promise with his fighting skills. In a surprising move, Dojin challenged Dagan to a public duel in front of the sophomore class, contingent upon the results of a coin-betting game. Dagan, seeing no harm, accepted the challenge. However, Dojin's luck seemed to have deserted him as he lost repeatedly. Growing weary of Dojin's relentless demands, Dagan conceded defeat, thereby allowing Dojin's request for a public fight to materialize. Overhearing this, Dojin left the scene with a triumphant smile. Shortly thereafter, Dohyun approached Dagan with a plea to defeat Dojin, who had manipulated him into borrowing money from loan sharks under his own name. However, Dohyun also hoped for Dagan's defeat, as a victory would mean he owed Dojin a substantial debt. Intrigued, Dagan inquired about Dohyun's proficiency in English. Upon receiving a positive response, Dagan made a deal. He'd confront Dojin, but in return, Dohyun would tutor him in English. His goal was to outsmart Jinwo in an upcoming English quiz. Meanwhile, Dojin had made his way to the school gym, the venue for the impending showdown. He surveyed the space, a mix of impatience and excitement coursing through him. While engrossed in conversation with his friends, a group of sophomore seniors approached them. Respectfully, Dojin and his friends bowed in greeting. Pleased with their humility, Zhou AK offered the juniors some sage advice. As the day wore on, Shanghua suggested that Zhou AK accompany him to the gym to witness the impending brawl. His peers insisted on joining him, cautioning him about going alone to a place swarming with powerful seniors. Despite Dagan's insistence that his friends go home, they remained steadfast in their decision to accompany him. Just then, Dagan received a message, prompting him to suggest his friends proceed while he'd catch up shortly. Upon hearing the news, a shiver ran through his companions as they found themselves having to face the challenge first, without Dagan's support. What startled them even further was not just the presence of a few elders, but nearly all of the school's notorious gangsters, leaders, and bullies gathered in anticipation. It seemed Dagan, a recent transfer student already whispered about in hushed tones due to his extraordinary strength and aura, had sparked their curiosity. Time seemed to crawl agonizingly slow. Dojin, whose patience was as thin as rice paper, abruptly threw down his phone. A tempest of rage stirred within him as he called out challengers. He even turned his fiery gaze towards one of Dagan's comrades, only to be checked by Sunghua, who reminded him of their agreed-upon rules. In the midst of Dojin's furious rant, a new arrival sparked hope. Was it Dagan? But it wasn't. The disappointment fueled Dojin's irritation, causing him to lash out, pummeling the newcomer with a barrage of blows. Each thud echoed ominously in the silence. Just as chaos began to reign, Dagan arrived, much to his friend's relief. Seeing one of his comrades battered, Dagan instantly shed his school coat, hurling it towards Dojin with such force that it struck some of his comrades. Dojin, taken aback by Dagan's assertiveness, launched himself at Dagan. However, Dojin's onslaught was effortlessly dodged by Dagan. Frustration flared within Dojin as his punches met nothing but air, earning him a mocking jibe from a boss who suggested that Dagan was merely studying Dojin's attack pattern. True to his words, Dagan launched a swift counterattack, his fists finding their target on Dojin's right side. Dagan didn't stop there. He aimed a kick at Dojin's knee, sending him sprawling to the ground before landing a punch. Dojin, taken aback by the power and persistence of Dagan's counterattacks, could do little but withstand the assault. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't land a single hit on Dagan, who left him bloodied and battered. The crowd watched in stunned silence, waiting for the next move. Undeterred, Dojin rose once more, summoning his remaining strength for a last-ditch assault. Yet even his all-out attack failed to faze Dagan, who retaliated with a punch that left Dojin unconscious. With Dojin vanquished, Dagan declared that seniors had no right to extort students, boldly challenging Yoak. This provoked the ire of the upperclassmen who rose from their seats, closing in on Dagan, their intent clear. They were ready to put Dagan in his place. Instantly, Dagan's allies stirred from their sleep, ready to aid him in the impending confrontation. However, Dagan, confident and self-assured, told them he could handle it on his own. True to his word, Dagan overpowered the gang of upperclassmen who had encircled and challenged him. Amidst the chaos, Dojin, battered and bloodied, rose once more, desperately launching another attack on Dagan. Despite his valiant effort, Dojin was unable to best Dagan, who ultimately emerged victorious. The following morning, a class president was strolling towards the library when he was met by Kim Do-hyun, who had been waiting patiently for him. Do-hyun, looking unusually cheerful, expressed his gratitude for the class president's willingness to accommodate his request. He was convinced that the decision made by the class president would mark the beginning of a promising, brighter future for him. The class president, finding Do-hyun's change in demeanor rather peculiar, could only ponder what might have transpired with Do-hyun. He was taken aback when Do-hyun revealed that Kwandagan's next mark was Kwak Dusik from Class 8, a fellow student. The class president found himself in a state of shock, but also relief, knowing that a peaceful life was within reach. In addition, he held a silent hope that Cha Yanwoo, a notorious bully, would also meet his downfall. Meanwhile, within the schoolyard, Kwak Dusik was caught off guard by Lee Seung-hoon, who abruptly interrupted his phone conversation with a curious inquiry. Irritated, Dusik rebuffed Seung-hoon's interference, causing Seung-hoon to diffuse the escalating tension. Unexpectedly, Dusik shifted the conversation to Kwon Dagan, the new kid whose mere presence aggravated him. In an effort to quell Dusik's anxiety, Seung-hoon assured him of a foolproof plan that would render Dagan helpless. Concurrently, in Class 8, the class president was seen conversing with Cha Yeonwoo, the frequent source of his bullying. Back in Class 8, the class president had a heated confrontation with Cha Yeonwoo, his regular tormentor. Far too often, the class president found himself at the receiving end of Wu's unkind behavior, pushing him into reluctant obedience. Unexpectedly, the classroom door flung open to reveal Kwon Dagan, whose sole purpose was to locate Kwok Dusik. Unfortunately, Dusik was absent, and his return time remained unknown. Seeing an opportunity, the class president, assured by the accuracy of his friend's prediction, endeavored to draw Dagan's attention, hoping this would lead to his tormentor's defeat. Engulfed by his pent-up frustration, the class president provoked Yeonwoo, leading to a heated altercation. Unable to contain his anger any longer, Yeonwoo retaliated with a punch, leaving the class president sprawled on the ground. In contrast to his expectations, Kwon Dagan stood unmoved, a silent observer, witnessing the class president being assaulted by Cha Yeonwoo. After what seemed like an eternity, Dagan cautiously stepped up to Yeonwoo, ordering him to stand down, a command Yeonwoo had been ignoring. Grasping Yeonwoo's hand with such force, Yeonwoo winced in pain. Despite his apparent calm, Dagan's temper flared when Yeonwoo spat on the shirt of a female classmate, his crude behavior sparking outrage. Unable to tolerate such insolence, Dagan struck Yeonwoo's face, causing him to crumble unconscious to the floor. Meanwhile, Kwok Dusik, lingering at the door, bore witness to the whole scenario. In an effort to quell the brewing chaos, Dagan invited Dusik outside for a private conversation. At the same time, Seong-hoon sought refuge in the school library, a known gathering place for Kwon Dagun's supporters. There, he encountered Do-yeon, who was taken aback to see the respected boss of Class 9 in such an unexpected location. Though puzzled by Seong-hoon's intentions, he wore a meaningful smile, expressing his desire to join their association. Back in Class 8, Dagan and Dusik had started a heated argument that riveted their classmates' attention. Aware that Dusik was amongst those students extorting money, Dagan demanded its return. However, Dusik claimed to have spent it all and had nothing left to give. Unfazed, Dagan insisted on reimbursement by the next day. As he departed from the classroom, Dusik launched a brutal surprise attack from behind, but Dagan, ever vigilant, evaded it deftly. The altercation escalated into a fierce battle. Dagan found himself challenged by Dusik's swift and agile offensive. His focus was further strained by the sight of students filming the brawl. The prospect of Dusik's face being caught on camera, and the consequent threat to his budding celebrity aspirations, was unacceptable to Dagan. Determined to prevent this, he strove to keep Dusik's face out of the recordings. Finally, after a strenuous bout of defending and evading, Dagan landed a strong counterattack, striking Dusik's back and stomach, bringing him to a halt. With Dusik incapacitated, Dagan ended the conflict with a stern warning. The owed money was to be produced by the next day, or Dusik's face, his most prized asset, would be at risk. Victorious over Dusik, Dagun's next target was Jisayak, a Class 5 student. Meanwhile, Seong-hoon was seen persuading Do-yeon to lead the association. Initially hesitant, Do-yeon eventually gave in to Seong-hoon's determined gaze. Vowing to assist Dagan in his mission to eliminate school bullies, Seong-hoon promised unwavering support to the cause. The school was thrown into turmoil. In the midst of the confusion, Gisayok, aware that he was the next target of Dagan, became nervous. His anxiety peaked after Dusik was defeated, leading him to hastily leave the school premises. However, on his escape route, he was ambushed by Dagan, whose menacing glare sent shivers down his spine. Overpowered and cornered, Gisayok surrendered all his money without a fight, hoping to expedite Dagan's mission. Meanwhile, in Class 9, Seong-hoon was preparing to head home when a distraught Dusik stormed in and unloaded a barrage of insults onto him. Before long, Jisayak also appeared, manipulated by Seong-hoon, who had orchestrated this confrontation. The realization that Seong-hoon had exploited their emotions and set them up enraged Dusik, who launched an immediate attack. Seong-hoon, however, effortlessly dodged and retaliated with a fierce kick to Dusik's face. This shocking display of force by Seong-hoon left Jisayak immobilized with fear, especially after he witnessed Seong-hoon bloody Dusik's nose with a single blow. Seong-hoon, sporting a mocking grin, challenged them to fight, yet it was apparent that their combined efforts were no match for his prowess. With a final declaration, Seong-hoon vowed to make Kwon Dagan the boss, stating that no one could thwart his plan. Later, as Dagan walked home, he was followed by a girl he had once rescued. She claimed that she trailed him because she spotted a suspicious figure tailing him, who had then vanished mysteriously, leaving her alone. Alarmed, Dagan offered her his phone number and requested that she contact him with any concerns. As twilight set in, the girl requested Dagan to escort her home. On their journey, she expressed gratitude for his past rescue and extended an apology on behalf of her friend Ji Yin, who had been rude to him. She assured Dagan that Ji Yin would personally apologize in due time and pleaded for him not to harbor too much resentment. Dagan was mildly taken aback by her sincere words, but he didn't hold a grudge. Intrigued by the mention of Class 9, Dagan inquired about the potential presence of bullying. The girl relayed that the class had indeed struggled with bullies initially, but Ji Yin had courageously stood up to them. Moreover, under the vigilant leadership of Sheng Hun as class president, the tormentors had re-evaluated their actions, leading to a peaceful resolution. According to her account, Sheng Hun was a born leader, and his classmates respected his authority. This created a harmonious environment within their class. As such, Dagan felt no need to probe further into class affairs. However, trouble brewed on the horizon. The next day, Do-yeon strode down the school corridors, seething with anger. He believed Sheng Hun was sabotaging his amicable relationship with Dagan. The cold, snake-like glint in Sheng Hun's eyes confirmed Do-yeon's suspicion that Sheng Hun was not the underdog he'd appeared to be, but a tyrant in disguise. Upon entering the classroom, Do-yeon found Dagan in conversation with Sheng Hun. Sheng Hun revealed that he had informed Dagan of their previous exchange. Dagan expressed his gratitude to Do-yeon for his diligent work and explained that Sheng Hun would now assume his responsibilities. Outraged, Do-yeon protested, insisting that he was the true leader of Class 9. He insinuated Sheng Hun was merely a bully. Although this triggered a brief dispute between Sheng Hun and Do-yeon, Dagan diffused the tension. To secure Dagan's trust, Sheng Hun vowed to do his utmost to deter school bullies, renouncing his former practice of extortion. His pledge seemed genuine. As such, Dagan designated Sheng Hun as his new aide, replacing Do-yeon. Before they embarked on their anti-bullying campaign, Sheng Hun suggested they assemble the Bully Violence Committee. Many students were taken aback by Sheng Hun's sudden closeness with Dagan, while others struggled to accept it. Despite the initial resistance, Sheng Hun believed he could rally their support in eradicating bullying and ending the illicit money collection. As the class president and leader of the school, he had first-hand knowledge of this racketeering practice, usually undertaken by class presidents. Additionally, as a member of the class council, Sheng Hun had connections spanning across all grades. He was privy to the full scope of this corrupt system: which classes collected money, who the key players were, and who they had to challenge to bring this operation down. The solution, according to Sheng Hun, was to confront the third-grade leader, Baek Soo-yuk. However, Baek and his executive committee were conspicuously absent. Their only option, then, was to target the second grades, believing this would draw out the elusive third-graders. But before they could dismantle the extortion ring, they had to rid their school of other forms of bullying. Dagan had to settle old scores with the first-graders. Among them was Ku Xianghua from Class 7, infamous for his violent tendencies despite his talent. Labeled as a menace that needed to be eliminated, he had developed a reputation as a devil due to his penchant for fighting. His sole motive for this was to study the unique martial arts styles of his victims. Driven by his obsession, Xianghua was certain that he would encounter Dagan first, intrigued by the remarkable skills Dagan displayed during his fight with Park Dojin in the auditorium. Once his meeting concluded, Sheng Hun proceeded to a sacred church where a mysterious man awaited him. They engaged in a discussion about Baek Soo-yuk, a name that stirred familiarity. The man had been searching for Soo-yuk unsuccessfully and sought Sheng Hun's advice. Unfazed, Sheng Hun assured him everything was proceeding as planned. Sheng Hun pledged to signal when everything was in place, confident that this plan would ignite a formidable storm. The following day at school, Xianghua was spotted conversing with Bai Iku, a fellow student he intended to use as bait to lure Kwon Dagun. In a conversation with Sheng Hun, Iku revealed he had a message for Dagun. Sheng Hun relayed this to Dagun, prompting him to rush to the pre-arranged meeting place, where Xianghua was seen anticipating his arrival. From a distance, Shanghua admired Dagan's exceptional strength, fueling his ambition to become even stronger. During a discussion with his accomplice, he was caught off guard by the appearance of a man named Shim Sangbo. Concurrently, Dagan arrived at the location specified by Xianghun, only to find Shanghua's men ready to pounce. A one-on-one confrontation was imminent. Shanghua's men launched an attack, but Dagan skillfully evaded it. Countering with a swift kick and a punch to the face, Dagan floored his opponent. Undeterred, Dagan continued to assault Shanghua's men ruthlessly. Despite their numbers, Dagan's superior skills enabled him to overpower them. Observing his men's defeat, Shanghua dispatched Shim Sangbo to confront Dagan. En route, Sangbo was intercepted by Dagan's 3 friends, members of the Bully Violence Committee, with no Manhwa leading the charge. Manhwa struggled to match Sangbo's speed, enduring multiple hits. Nevertheless, he managed to turn the tide and land a blow that sent Sangbo sprawling. Meanwhile, Dagan's other friends, Hojong and Zhang Min, searched for Dagan but were halted by Xianghua's men, led by Che Chomin. His exceptional speed left them at a disadvantage, and Chomin exploited openings to launch repeated attacks. Amid this chaos, Manhwa appeared beleaguered after his skirmish with Sangbo. Despite emerging victorious from the battle, he was significantly injured with many parts of his body battered and bruised. As he rested, he was unexpectedly visited by Dagan, who queried about his presence and the events that transpired. Xianghua, on the other hand, was taken aback that Sangbo, a renowned boxer, had been bested by Manhwa. Sangbo's downfall left her disappointed, as she was looking forward to a second round between Quan Dagun and Shim Sangbo. Although her expectations were unmet, she felt that she had gleaned some valuable information. Meanwhile, Hojong and Zhang Min were locked in a relentless fight with Cho Man. Despite enduring relentless onslaught, their robust defenses caused Cho Man to be noticeably frustrated. As the pair found themselves backed into a corner, Lee X Young-hoon fortuitously arrived in the nick of time to rescue them. Shortly after, Dagun and a severely wounded Manhwa entered the scene. Eventually it led to a face-off between Dagun and Xianghua. The two engaged in fierce combat, with Xianghua launching the initial strikes. Dagun dodged attack after attack, although his movements were visibly unsteady, causing Xianghua's strikes to come dangerously close. However, Dagun's exceptional prowess allowed him to overcome Xianghua in record time. The following day, news of Xianghua's defeat and Quan Dagan's ascension to the position of first-grade leader spread like wildfire across the school. Students were buzzing with talk about it, with many expressing astonishment given that he was a newcomer who wasn't particularly known for his academic abilities. Concurrently, the news reached Banggan Technical High School, with students expressing surprise over Dagan's rapid rise to leadership. As Dagan inquired about Manhwa's well-being to Sheng-hun, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Beck Suzy, who congratulated him on his newfound role. However, Dagan paid no heed to Suzy's congratulatory remarks, causing her to become irritated. In her annoyance, she pulled at Dagan's shirt collar, accidentally revealing more than intended. The incident caused Suzy to blush with embarrassment, leading her to apologize profusely for her impulsive action. When Dagan questioned her reasons for seeking him out, she insisted he should first address her as queen. This silly demand led Hojiang to tease her lightly, causing her further embarrassment. In a somewhat desperate move, she compelled Dagan to share his phone number with her. Having no other option, Dagan obliged. Subsequently, Suzy left, struggling to mask her embarrassment. As the newly crowned first-grade leader, Dagan's responsibilities included meeting the leaders of the second and third grades, as indicated by Xiang-hoon's note, which also cryptically suggested who he might need to defeat next. Dagan made his way towards the hallway leading to the second-grade classrooms. Pushing open the door, he was met with a horrific sight. A male student struggling for breath, the victim of strangulation. A fellow classmate tried to bar Dagan from entry, but without a moment's hesitation, Dagan landed a punch on his face, rendering him unconscious. He then turned his attention to Ye Gil, a male student whose rudeness was apparent even in his casual greetings. This incensed a group of Ye Gil's allies, who immediately sprang to their feet and rushed at Dagan. However, their offensive was hardly a challenge for Dagan, who swiftly overpowered them and collected the money they had on them. His fury ignited, Dagan slammed Ye Gil's head against the wall. When one of Ye Gil's friends rushed towards Dagan with a cutter, he effortlessly overpowered him as well, then did the same to the other second graders, who foolishly attempted to assault him. The teacher, becoming aware of the situation, summoned Dagan to the office, where a stern reprimand awaited him. Dagan bore the teacher's scolding silently, knowing that the teacher was oblivious to the true motive behind his actions. Soon after, the chairman of the school arrived and admonished the teacher to treat Dagan with more kindness. Dagan's meeting with the chairman left him with an uneasy feeling. This was their first interaction since their project discussion. Simultaneously, the second grade captain, Wan Jia, was seething with rage upon discovering the battered state of his classmates, all victims of the first grader, Quan Dagan. His anger reached a boiling point, fueling his thirst for revenge. As Jia mulled over his retaliation, the unexpected reunion between Dagan and the chairman took place. Amidst a serious exchange, the chairman mockingly brought up Dagan's project, jesting about its lack of progress and suggesting that Dagan should eradicate all the bullies. As Dagan was engaged with the chairman, Wan Jia stormed into Dagan's classroom, brutally assaulting Dagan's classmates. Regardless of their attempts to retaliate, they were defenseless against Wan Jia's remarkable strength and towering physique. Just as a female classmate was about to fall victim to Wan Jia, Dagan reappeared in the nick of time to rescue her. His gaze was icy, murderous, suggesting a readiness to annihilate anyone who stood in his way. This marked the onset of a brutal battle, with Wan Jia demonstrating unprecedented power, a result of his arduous journey to attain the power of Buddha. Having reached the state of nirvana, he was able to land blows so swiftly, it seemed as though he had 1,000 hands. That power turned out to make it quite difficult for Dagan to face Jawok. But even so, with his strength, he managed to defeat Jawok, until he could not move his body even once. Then, to celebrate Dagan's victory together with his friends, they held a party, and they all spent the night together. Chapter 50 comes to a close.